Hello and good morning students. I welcome you all to yet another video lesson on education subject. We are dealing with chapter 4, educational thinkers. So let's do a quick recap of what we have done in part 1 of our chapter 4. We have studied about the philosophy of Frederick Froebel. We have also studied the philosophy of Pestalozzi and Maria Montessori, and we have also studied about their activities that are taking place in the different system of education that they have founded. So moving on today, we will look at the Indian educationists. Today we will be dealing with Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore philosophy of education. So let's look at the Mahatma Gandhi system of education. Mahatma Gandhi was born on 2nd October 1869. He was a great philosopher, educationist, and a political reformer. So he has a great contribution in the field of education as philosopher and educationist. Okay, so Gandhiji evolved a new philosophy of education. According to him, education is an all-round drawing out of the best in child and man, body, mind, and soul. So if you still remember, then in the I think in chapter 1 I've dealt with this very quotation: education is an all-round development or all-round drawing out of the best in the child and man, body, mind, and soul. So he have mainly focused on this quotation. Now let's look at Gandhiji's educational philosophy. So there are I think 5 points given by Gandhiji as his educational philosophy. Point number 1 is education in mother tongue. Gandhiji advocated that mother tongue should not only be a subject of study, but also medium of instruction. According to him, the greatest handicap during that time of education was that education was imparted in English. So that was the greatest handicap of the system of education in that time. So this hindered the development of understanding and clarity of ideas of the learner. It was his firm belief that mother tongue helps the children to express themselves efficiently and clearly. One can learn much better in one's mother tongue. So education is in mother tongue was one of the main educational philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. Point number 2 is free and compulsory education for all. So Gandhiji wanted that education from 6 to 14 years of age should be free and compulsory for all children in the country. Point number 3 is education should be craft-centered. So Gandhiji had a strong belief in the principle of learning by doing. Okay, so what is this learning by doing? Learning by doing is a system of education that the children do the craft works as well as learn. So according to Gandhiji, it was absolutely wrong to think that true education is acquired only from books alone. Okay, according to him, there are other methods and sources which are more helpful in acquiring true knowledge. So Gandhiji believed that school must be a place for doing many things. So education should be craft-centered, and the education of the child should begin by teaching him or her some useful handicraft and by making him capable from the moment he begins his training. In this way, schools will become more self-supporting. So education should be craft-centered. Self-supporting education is more or less like point number 3 that we have discussed now. And education based on non-violence. Gandhiji wanted the application of non-violence in the training of child as a good citizen of the nation as well as of the world. Through this scheme of education, that is education based on non-violence, he wanted to eliminate class and communal hatred and bring peace and harmony on the globe. So that is the educational philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. Moving on, we will look at the aims of education according to Mahatma Gandhi. So he had ultimate aims as well as immediate aims. Okay, so ultimate aims mainly deals with the self-realization, oneness with God, knowledge of God, spiritualism, and all the stuffs. So we will directly move on to immediate aims. Immediate aims, point number 1 is all-round personality development. So education should not only focus on one aspect of development, but education should take care of physical, mental, intellectual development of the individuals, and all-round personality development should take place in the school. So it should all go side by side, and none of them should be left out. So all-round personality development was one of the most immediate aims of education according to Mahatma Gandhi. Point number 2 is preparation for complete living. See, life is very complex, and Gandhiji realized it and applied this principle to this scheme of education. Okay, like, so this would make the child capable of coping up with the complexities of life. If a child could adjust himself to the individual self, occupation and society, then he can be considered prepared for complete living. So preparation for complete living, or one of the main aim of education was preparing the child for complete living. Point number 3 is character building. See, character is regarded as the best of education. An individual should not work for his personal gains only, okay, but he must cooperate and collaborate with his fellow beings to bring a new social order. So character building, the most important aim of education was character building. Training for citizenship. Every individual lives in the society. He has to obey the rules and regulations set by the society, right? So education should impart such training to the students that they respect the rules of the society, contribute to the welfare of the society with love and sense of belongingness. So such type of education and training will help an individual to become a good citizen who can serve the society, to bring harmony and peace. So training of citizenship was also one of the main aim of education, main immediate aim of education according to Mahatma Gandhi. So harmonious development. Education is, like we've discussed earlier, education is the all-round drawing out of the best in child, man, body, mind and soul, right? So the chief goal of Gandhiji's education was harmonious development of all powers innate as well as acquired. So that is the harmonious development of the immediate aims. Moving on, we'll look at the cultural aims. Simple acquisition of knowledge is not enough for an individual. So culture is the need of every individual for refining his personality, since culture plays an important role in developing his personality. So education should be given in such a way that the child respect his cultural values as well as move forward to the harmonious development of the child. So cultural aim was also one of the immediate aim of education according to Mahatma Gandhi. Ultimate aims. The ultimate aim of education should be learning and earning. Only then can a man lead a fulfilling life? So that is those 7 points are the immediate aims of education according to Mahatma Gandhi. Moving on, we will look at the basic education founded by Mahatma Gandhi. So what is this basic education? The term basic is derived from the word base, which means bottom or foundation. Therefore, basic education is fundamental to the whole scheme of education. Okay, so why is it called basic education? It is basic in the fact that it relates to the basic occupation of the human life. It is basic as it is correlated to the basic needs of the child. So that is the meaning of basic education. So basic education, one main aim of basic education founded by Mahatma Gandhi was it also somehow comes to the aim of learning by doing. Okay, so Mahatma Gandhi wanted students not only to study, not only to receive bookish knowledge, but he wanted the students to learn basic works of life so as to help him earn his livelihood. So learning by doing, or education, craft education, all this comes under the system of basic education. So basic education is also known by other names like Buniyadi Shiksha or Nai Talim, but most commonly it is known as basic education or Warda scheme of education. So Gandhiji emphasized the self-sufficient aspect of education along with other aspects. So the students need to be self-sufficient. The students need to have those basic talents and basic craftsman skills in them so as to help them earn their livelihood and daily bread. In fact, he wanted India to be self-sufficient in every walk of national life. Like we have discussed earlier, in those times, the system of education was in a way like the students receive only the bookish knowledge, and the situation of the country was also not that good. So Gandhiji, he wanted India to be self-sufficient in every walk of national life through the system of basic education. So in your textbook, they have given the silent features of this scheme, Warda scheme of education at a glance. They have also given the merits and demerits, and they have given in a very thorough and in a very understanding way. So I want you all to go through this Warda scheme of education, their silent features and merits and demerits as well. Moving on, we will look at the educational philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore was born on 7th May 1861. He was not only a great poet, but he was also a philosopher and an educationist. Okay, and Rabindranath Tagore was unhappy with the system of education prevailing during his time. He used to call these schools as mills of learning. Mills of learning means there was no room for creativity for the children, and it was just receive the bookish knowledge and memorize it and give the exams, and that was all it. So he did not like the system of education prevailing at that time. And according to him, little children learn more quickly from the attitude of the teacher than the knowledge imparted to them by the teacher. His hatred towards the system of physical punishment prevailing in that time inspired him for establishing his own ashram school in 1901 at Bolpur. So, due to the system of education prevailing at the time, it inspired him to open his own ashram school in the year 1901. Now, we will all look at Tagore's philosophy of humanity. On humanity. Okay, what was his philosophy, or what was his thoughts on humanity? The first philosophy is that freedom is the nature of education. Like we've discussed earlier, freedom should be given to the child for creative self-expression and all that. So, and he placed a very major emphasis on the promotion of creative self-expression of the child. So Tagore's first philosophy on humanity is that freedom is the nature, or freedom is one of the most important factor in the education of a child. Tagore's philosophy also included peaceful coexistence with all living as well as non-living beings in the environment, and education should take place through natural manifestation in natural environment. So Tagore, being an internationalist, stood for the essential unity of mankind. Okay, Tagore was also an internationalist, and positive and self-discipline was given new term as rational discipline. During his time, positive and self-discipline was given a new term, which is rational discipline, based on the response of the inner voice of conscience. So Tagore was not only an internationalist, but he was also a naturalist, humanist, individualist, realistic, and internationalist. So that is the philosophy of philosophy on humanity according to Rabindranath Tagore. Moving on, we will look at the educational philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. The point that I discussed earlier is the educational philosophy of Tagore, and now we will look at the philosophy on humanity. The points that I've discussed earlier, that is freedom is the nature of education, that is the educational philosophy of Tagore. Now we will look at the philosophy on humanity. Like I said earlier, Tagore was also a naturalist. He considered nature as a supreme entity. He was a humanist, and he had great faith in the goodness of humanity. He was also an individualist, and he advocated the right and freedom of the individual. He was a realist, and in spite of his idealism, he acknowledged the realities of life. Okay, and Tagore was also an internationalist, and he was a great supporter of world unity. So that is the educational philosophy of Tagore and philosophy of humanity by Rabindranath Tagore. So we conclude that they were great thinkers in the field of education, okay, and their contribution is very unique, very genuine and creative, both individually and collectively. Education was not so developed during the philosophers' times. Education was not so developed during that time, but the ideas that they have presented in the field of education are relevant even today, right? All the system of education that we are following now is relevant even today due to the ideas and creativeness of those philosophers and thinkers. Like Pestalozzi advocated the importance of psychology in the process of education, and Maria Montessori was the one who emphasized this system of education. As a result, psychology has become a subject of education. Angshan was introduced by Pestalozzi and retreated by Mahatma Gandhi through his concept of learning by doing. So, and both Froebel and Tagore advocated the ideas of naturalistic growth and their comparison of students as plants and a teacher as a gardener and realization of individuality. Maria advocated the importance of sense training and community life, which has become the foundation of modern boarding skills. So these are all the educational systems that was founded by one philosopher and emphasized by another philosopher. Though so individually and collectively they form all the system of education that we are following now. So there are many different educational philosophies invented in due time, okay, like perennialism, progressivism, reconstructivism, constructivism, behaviorism, humanism, and essentialism. So all these philosophies have developed over the years, and some of these philosophies are teacher-centric and some of these are student-centric. But they all have the same goal, and the goal is to provide students with the best education possible. So all these educational philosophies are given in your textbook in your page number 84, so you can also go through that. So we after reading this whole chapter, we can undoubtedly conclude that these thinkers, philosophers, and educators were the instruments in laying down the foundation of principle, methods, practices of present-day education, and therefore their relevance will remain forever because they were the pillars of educational philosophy. So I hope you have gained something from what we have discussed today. With that, we have come to the end of our chapter 4, Educational Thinkers. I'll see you all in the next class. Thank you.